Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream are made possible by the generous support of PNC and the Raskin Family Fund, with additional funding from Robert Conrad, Cleveland State University, the Chautauqua Institution, the Payne Fund, and the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland, Incorporated.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. I'm Margot James Copeland, Chair and CEO of the KeyBank Foundation, and a proud member of the City Club. It is my pleasure to welcome today's speaker, co-anchor, and NBC News Weekend Today, Sheinelle Jones. In the last 20 years, the news business has changed. The advent of fake news, social media, and self-curated news feeds has led legacy news organizations to reinvent themselves and develop a new understanding of the mission of the Fourth Estate. Part of that change also involves overturning traditionally held roles by white men and incorporating more diverse faces and voices in shaping the news, both behind the scenes and in front of the camera. In 2013, a study from Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism found that despite comprising the bulk of journalism students, women remain a noticeable minority in top journalistic roles. The role of women, especially women of color, in shaping the news is especially pertinent in today's climate, and it is the context that our speaker joins us today. A Wichita, Kansas native, Ms. Jones has spent her career as a reporter and news anchor from news stations in Illinois, Oklahoma, and Pennsylvania before being hired by NBC News in 2014. She interviewed such notables as the former Senator Barack Obama and the former Senator Hillary Clinton. In addition, she's covered human interest stories ranging from the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday in Selma, Alabama, to interviewing Ryan Ferguson, a young man who spent 10 years in prison for a crime he did not commit. In her role, Ms. Jones is also a contributor to Today Parenting Team, a multi-platform community forum where she shares about her life as a multitasking mom, young mom, little ones, including a set of twins and an older, and interacts with viewers around the country. She'll tell you more. She is a member of the National Association of Black Journalists, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and the Links Incorporated, an international group of women devoted to enriching the lives of families in their community. Ms. Jones, who comes from a family of educators, takes special interest in activities involving education. She's a graduate of Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism with a bachelor's degree in broadcast journalism and Spanish. Ladies and gentlemen, members and friends of the City Club, it is a great honor and pleasure. Please join me in welcoming Sheinelle Jones.
Good afternoon. We'll do a little bit better than that. Good afternoon. I am so happy to be in Cleveland today. I have friends at NBC who are from here, and they were so excited to tell me about the restaurants here, the new restaurants, and the people, and how much they love Cleveland, and how much they miss the city, and this is their home. And you know that's a good sign when people move away from the city and they're in New York City or wherever they are, but they're always talking about home. So that's how you know you're in a good place. And now that I'm here, I can see why you love Cleveland, why they love Cleveland. Last night I had the opportunity to dine with some of my Link sisters, and we were driving around the area, and it's just a beautiful city. So I'm so happy to be here and to chat with you briefly this afternoon. So with the time that I have, I want to talk to you briefly about my journey to network news, to give you a better perspective of how I view what we're covering in the news cycles these days and how it shapes my reporting and even the questions that I ask that you'll see on the air. I'll also give you my 2 cents on some hot topics, as she just mentioned: politics, social media, and its undeniable influence on our lives, and this new phenomenon of fake news and what's fake and what's not fake, in my opinion. And then I'd love to hear from you. You can ask me whatever you'd like. Okay, shall we dance? Okay. Well, first things first, as she mentioned, I am a Midwestern girl. I grew up in Wichita, Kansas. I was born in Philly, but I grew up in Wichita. And I've been living and breathing news for most of my life. I will tell you, I'm 39 years old now, and I remember when I was in 5th grade, Mrs. James' 5th grade class at Gammon Elementary, we had a career day, and they asked us to draw a picture of what we wanted to do when we were adults, when we grew up. And I remember it was a yellow sheet of construction paper, and I drew a picture of myself as a news anchor. And I remember I put my hands like this. I did the helmet hair, right, because all news anchors have helmet hair. The hoop earrings. I did the little square box by my head with little squiggly lines in it to be the headlines. And that's what I wanted to do. And no one told me that I couldn't. I always tell kids, what you think about, you bring about. So yeah, 5th grade, I said this is what I wanted to do, and I never really looked back. So fast forward to high school. I was interning in newsrooms. How many high schoolers do we have here? High schoolers? All right. Okay. Well, I remember when I was in high school, because everybody knew Sheinelle wanted to be a news reporter, I was interning in newsrooms, right? I remember my senior year in high school, I was a cheerleader, and I would rush to the CBS affiliate in my car, in my cheerleading skirt, and the highlight of my day would be if the teleprompter lady didn't show up and I got to run the teleprompter for the 5 o'clock news. That was joy. Fast forward through that, I attended Northwestern University, Medill School of Journalism. And my first job was in Springfield, Illinois. I was a one-man band. Anybody know what that is? A one-man band. So I carried my own camera, my own tripod. I did all of it. And I have to tell you, it weighed more than I did. It was huge. And I would prop it up, and then I would get in front of it and report, and then I would come back and, I cut my head off. Let me do it again, And I would edit my own stuff. So I did all of that, did that for years. And then eventually they promoted me to the morning anchor there at the NBC station in Springfield, Illinois. From there, I moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma, where they hired me as the nightside reporter and weekend anchor. And then they promoted me to 5 p.m. anchor and weekend nightside reporter. And then I moved to Philadelphia, where I was a morning reporter for the Fox station there. I did 7 to 8 live shots a morning. And then after about a year, they moved me to the morning anchor position, where I anchored for about 4 hours a morning. I essentially woke up at 3:30 in the morning for about 9 years in a row. Imagine that. And in the midst of all of that, I got married and had 3 kids. So there you go. And then 3 years ago, I made the leap to network news. And I guess you could probably say leap is a fair word. This girl from Kansas was now living in the heart of New York City. At the time, my twins were 2 and my oldest was 5. So imagine moving to New York City with 2 2-year-olds and a 5-year-old. I took 2 triple strollers with me. You can imagine pushing triple strollers down the streets of New York City. The equilibrium just doesn't work. It's just not fun. So now someone would have told me and pulled me aside and they said, okay, let me tell you how rewarding but extremely challenging it will be to work in network news. I don't know if I would have understood. You almost have to live it first. I will say this. I am so happy that the election season with Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, I'm so happy that all of that followed. I guess it happened a little earlier or later in my journey there, because I have a feeling it might have eaten me alive. But in many ways, by the time the election season happened, I was ready for it mentally, and I'll explain in a moment. I was trying to think of a way to dig into the topic of being an African-American woman at the network and what it means to me. And this is the analogy I just came up with. So when you think of an analogy, but you haven't actually verbalized it, you don't know how it's going to land. So stand by, because we'll see what happens. But this is how I can explain being a black woman at the network. Okay, so the other day, when I was thinking about what I was going to say to you guys, I was looking at my daughter, my 5-year-old daughter, and we have this long mirror in my room. And she likes to, stand in my mirror and swing. She has braids, so she'll swing her braids. And she takes ballet with Alvin Ailey, and they have these little red lid tarts. So she'll get in the lid tart, and she has a little pot belly like I used to, and she'll go. And she's just so happy. You know, the rest of us as women, we're trying to suck in our belly, but she thinks it's funny, right? So she giggles and she's happy, and I just want her to stay in that happy place for as long as possible. Happy, friendly, unassuming little girl. And that's the way I walked into network news. I mean, belly too. No, I sucked mine in. But, you know, I walked in and I was happy. And frankly, I was just thankful, really. And then as aging happens, you picture a teenager as an African-American teenager. First, you're dealing with all of the things, the hormones and the life, you know, things that life brings at that age. And then also being a girl of color, often the only one in the room. And that's what happened a little further in for me personally at the network. You look up and you're like, dang, I'm the only woman in this room. Or, dang, I'm the only one covering this thing, and I'm the only black person in this entire place, or in this city, for that matter, in some places. Or you're in a room and you're like, dang, everybody here is so smart. I'm the only one here who didn't go to Harvard. Not that Northwestern's not great, but it's like, wow. Or, man, everybody in this room went to boarding school. And I have to be honest, I didn't even understand anything about boarding school. I remember I was talking to one of my colleagues, and I didn't get it. I'm a grown woman, and I'm like, why would your parents send you away? Like, why? Why would they do that? And then I think they were probably like, you dummy, it's elite. You know, I just didn't know. But that's one of those things where I'm like, it was a learning lesson for me. And it kind of gets to you after a while. And it's easy to doubt yourself and to question if you belong. And so I remember struggling for a quick second, although you would never know it on the air. But I remember it was tough. And there was one day in particular, I was reporting for the 9 o'clock hour. And I remember my voice started to kind of quiver a little bit. And all of a sudden I was like, wait, I'm nervous. I'm never nervous. But I was nervous because I started thinking, who's watching me? And do I belong? It was starting to get to me. So I was like, okay, I need a break. And in our business, a break is like just 2 days off in a row. So I was like, I need a break. So I looked online, got a ticket to Wichita, Kansas, I was like, let me just get home. And I got home to Wichita to be with my folks, my mom, my little brother, my grandfather, my grandmother, almost to just refuel and remember who I am and whose I am, and that God didn't bring me this far to just drop me off. And I went to my home church, good old New Hope Baptist Church, you know, where the pastor says, stand up, Sheinelle, tell us what you're doing, you know. And everybody, so you stand up and give your report. And everybody was just so proud of me. And, you know, Margot talked about the Link sisters. You know, my mother was a Link, or is a Link, and my grandmother's a Link, and I'm a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. And growing up, those women were like my aunties and my cousins. And so you go back there, and I call them my room full of Claire Huxtables because they're all just fly and smart and loving and warm. And it almost kind of filled my cup again. You almost, you know, you're refueled. And it was good to step out of the New York City matrix to just, for the reminder that I may be alone in those rooms sometimes, but I'm in the room. And there are a lot of people in homes and cities across this country where my presence matters, and I represent them. So I'm like, okay, I get it. I hear you, Lord. Thank you. I'm ready to go back to New York City. I'm ready to jump in. I'm ready to do this. I have value. I'm smart. I'm here. I have purpose. You know, all those good things. I'm living my dream. So once I got all that out of the way and everything was fine, back in New York City with this renewed confidence, next thing you know, I look up and it was just in time for this past presidential election. And I remember vividly once the debate started with Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. You guys remember those debates? It was like must-see TV, grab the popcorn. And in the news world, you can imagine for us how crazy it was, right? And in addition to all of the issues, there were so many side angles. It was like, for me, if you imagine getting in a shower and just putting your face and just letting it, you know, hit your face. It's like putting your face in a faucet, except it's a news faucet, and it just hits you in the face. And it was nonstop. And we all kept saying, all of the journalists, we all kept saying, you know, when we would go out and cover things, we're like, okay, when this election's over, we're going to be able to breathe. You know, if you were making a movie, you wouldn't even be able to write all of the things that were happening in real life. You wouldn't even believe it. But it hasn't let up. And do you remember where you were election night? How many of you remember where you were election night? Well, for us, it was insane. I had note cards with poll numbers and red states versus blue states coming out of my ears. I was anchoring national cut-ins from Washington, D.C., in the studio where they tape Meet the Press. And so for me, that was kind of surreal. And then leading up to that, we would have these big-time phone calls with all of these big wigs from NBC and all these political big wigs. And I remember one time I was prepping before I left. I'm sitting in my living room, and I'm on this conference call, and it's like Tom Brokaw and Chuck Todd. And it was almost like this out-of-body experience. I feel like I was like flying out of my body, and I was like, this is amazing. And then I had to like get back in my body and like, okay, let me be a news writer, let me pay attention. So essentially on election night, when Lester Holt or Rachel Maddow, when they would toss to local coverage for, during their breaks, it would come to me for most of the cities because a lot of the local cities didn't have anybody to do that coverage because it was around the clock. And it was stressful. And we were living it just like you were. We're human too, trying to take it all in. And when the direction started to tilt to Trump, you could almost feel it. Right or wrong, it's one of those things where, so many people just didn't call it. Let's just be honest. And I remember I was battling my own health issues at the time. I have a vocal polyp, and I was losing my voice. And all I could think of is, okay, just don't let your voice squeak. So imagine the election is happening. It's election night. Lester Holt tosses to you, and you're trying to talk about red states versus blue states, but you're also trying to talk so that your voice doesn't squeak because you're trying to hide that. So it was a lot. It was very stressful. And I remember, just trying to stick to the facts, ask the reporters in the field what they were thinking, and they were talking to viewers. Just do the job and think about all the other stuff later. Just stay in your body. That's what I kept telling myself. And since that night, it just hasn't let up. I mean, if you talk to my colleagues who cover the White House, they'll tell you it never ends. And you can't just have one White House correspondent. You have to have a team of correspondents because there are just so many angles to cover. And right after the election, and you guys know this, there was this period of collectively, okay, what happened here? How did so many in the media miss this was the important question. And at the time, I was also anchoring on MSNBC. I would follow Joy Reid on Saturdays. And I just remember covering so many rallies and protests, and we were starting to get a real idea of how much hate and anger was out there. I remember when they asked me to do Saturdays on MSNBC, I was like, oh, no problem. Saturday afternoon. And next thing I know, I'm like, there are rallies and protests coming out of my ears. And I thought, what is going on? And I remember there was one time where I was interviewing this guy. He was a high-ranking white supremacist member in this group. And he had pulled out of the group and walked away because it was too toxic for him. I couldn't believe it. I was like, let me interview this man. How is it that it was too toxic for him? It was a fascinating interview. He pulled out and he was redeemed, if you will. He was just like, it was killing me. It was just like the hate was killing me and I was tired of it, right? And so I would do those interviews, talking to politicians and professors around the country and race and politics and Trump and women's rights and healthcare and tax reform, immigration bans, you name it. And I would go home to my kids and I'm thinking, what is this world coming to? Now, I'm not naive enough to think that hate didn't exist or doesn't exist, but it just seemed emboldened and, that people aren't hiding their true feelings anymore. And what I realized, if mom and dad are angry or if mom and dad are talking about politics, you guys know kids are like sponges and it's like a trickle-down effect. And the kids end up talking about it at school. And even my kids were talking politics. When I was 5, I was not talking about politics. I was sucking in my belly like my little dog. I'm looking in the mirror with my little Afro puffs. And there was this little girl in one of my son's playgroup circles who told the other kids that her mom voted for Trump. They made that little girl cry. Like, to this day, certain moms don't even look at her. Now, I'd tell you more, but we're streaming live, and there's social media everywhere, and this woman might hear this and know I'm talking about her, so I'm gonna stop. But my point is, that's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. We should not be causing 5-year-old girls to cry. They're supposed to be playing in the mirror and spinning and happy and all of that good stuff. And I asked myself again, where is all of this going? Well, I would be lying to you if I told you that I had the answers. We monitor social media networks and comments at work. And you know this, people are so divided. I see some of the things they tweet NBC News and the Today Show. And if you were beamed in from Mars and you didn't know anybody, you wouldn't even think there was a middle. It's just one side or the other. And there are so many streams of content coming in from non-traditional sources that you can find pretty much whatever you want to hear. And if you don't like what you're reading or you don't like what you're hearing, you can just dismiss it as fake news. And I see it happening. Here's the problem. We're now learning that there really were fake accounts set up to sway public opinion and stir up anger, and it worked. So from my vantage point, as someone in the media, you have this situation where we're working our butts off, we're calling sources, we're checking and rechecking facts, we're traveling, we're sacrificing friendships, relationships. A lot of us are putting off getting married, all for the sake of our careers and for the power of journalism because we believe in it. And I know these men and women, and they are not fake. And the stories that they gather are not fake. And I'm offended for them. They are not in a basement somewhere just making up stories. They're on the phones all day long. So the word fake news, in my opinion, has too broad of a brush. Again, where is all this going? I don't know, but I can tell you this. It feels like this country, in my opinion, is having an anxiety attack. And if you think for a moment about someone who's having an anxiety attack, you can't think clearly, right? So when you're freaking out and you can't breathe, it's difficult to make sound decisions and react to real problems and real challenges, healthcare, homeland security, education, real challenges that we face in this country. And one thing is certain, we have to get it together. And in my opinion, there's one place that I believe we can start, and that's in your house and in mine. You have to kick out diversity, or you have to kick out division and bring in diversity, in my opinion. And when I say kick out division, I mean in your life and in your heart. You have to try. I have to try. And I'm not a minister, but I do know that your life has to reflect goodness and kindness and diversity because it's a ripple effect. It's in Cleveland. It's in where I'm from, in Wichita. It's a ripple effect. And here's something practical. Show of hands. How many of you have kids, grandkids, nieces or nephews? How many of you? Look around this room. So we have little beings around us that see us all the time. Have they seen you invite someone over for dinner who doesn't look like you? Maybe of a different skin color, a different religion. And here's why I say that, especially for the little kids. So when nasty things are said on the playground, or let's say they're teenagers and there are nasty things that are being said on their Facebook feed about one particular race or one particular religion, they can know from their own life, they can know from mom and dad and auntie and uncle, they can learn from you that that's not necessarily the truth from your life and what you show them by your actions, and that you can't paint of this broad brush and categorize people. And sometimes I think when you work in the media, we get put in this category. You get put in a category of liberal media, or, you have bleeding hearts. And I don't know about that, but sometimes a lot of us just get to see a lot of things, and we travel the country and the world, and, you meet a lot of people, you see a lot of pain, you connect with people, and it just pulls at you. And here's the thing, I can talk about politics all day long, trust me, but for me, it is bigger than that. It's about people. I love people. I love children. I'm curious, and I want the best for people. And I'm finally having to acknowledge, just now, before I turn 40, that not everyone is nice. That took me a long time to learn, believe it or not. I don't use the word evil just because it makes me uncomfortable, but I must acknowledge that with everything I talk about on the anchor desk, that not everything is roses. But you can't live in that place of fear of the toxic, right? You can't live in that place of being angry. Demanding action, absolutely. There's poverty. There's poverty here in Cleveland. So can we get upset about it? Absolutely. But not anger. That will not help our collective anxiety attack, in my opinion. So I want to challenge you this afternoon to have more conversations, kids, more conversations with people who are different than you are in whatever way. Please promise me that. And it has to start there, some common ground. And I'll end with this. In the past 10 days, with my 2 5-year-olds and an 8-year-old at home, in the past 10 days, I have traveled and reported from Atlanta, Memphis, San Diego, New York, then Nashville, Detroit, and now I'm here in Cleveland. I just interviewed a little girl at St. Jude's Hospital last week who's dealing with cancer, bone cancer. And I have not been able to get that little girl out of my mind. I promise to God, I have thought about that little girl, little Lizzie, every single day since last week. And, she just wants to live. She wants to listen to music and watch YouTube. She was telling me how she just wants to get out of the hospital so she can get a new pair of pink Uggs. And, she just wants to do what 10-year-olds do. And I asked her, because I'm coming from a news set where people are screaming about healthcare. And then I asked this little girl at St. Jude, I'm like, how do you keep going? What keeps you going? And she said, hope. she can say that, And then last Friday, I interviewed a military veteran who was home for a few days from serving overseas, and we surprised his wife and his daughters. The hugs were priceless. It's my favorite thing when let's say somebody from the military comes in and like a dad comes in and the little girl runs to him and wraps her little arm around his neck. It's just heartwarming, and it's priceless. I've surprised teachers in the last couple of days who are changing kids' lives all around the country with just few resources. I just landed my first exclusive at the Today Show this week. I just interviewed country star Jason Aldean. He was on the stage in Las Vegas during one of this country's worst mass shootings, obviously. And I think here's the thing. The majority of us all want the same things. We want to live, we want peace, we want love, we want to be with our families. We have to start operating out of a spirit of love. I know that may not be what you expected to hear from this news anchor, but that's what I have to say. And I've decided to let my heart speak ever since that moment I went back to Wichita. I'm like, I am living my purpose, and I'm going to say what my heart says to say, and using the experiences that I have in the news business with this career. So I certainly thank the good Lord. He blessed me with this career that I have dreamed of since I was in 5th grade. And now I know that my voice matters, and your voice matters too. Thank you for listening.
I'm Stephanie Jansky, Director of Programming at the City Club, and today we are enjoying a forum with Sheinelle Jones, co-anchor for NBC News' Weekend Today. We're about to begin the Q&A with the audience. We welcome questions from everyone, City Club's members, guests, students. May we have the first question, please?
You can ask me whatever you want.
Thank you very much for coming in. I really enjoyed your remarks. I'm curious, you were at Fox 29, I think it was 9 years or something. Could you tell us, what are the one or two biggest differences, changes, challenges that you faced going from being on local news for so long, because you were in local news before that, correct? And now being at the network. What are the one or two, three biggest things?
Well, it's interesting. A lot of people just assume that going to the network is better or it's a move up, but it's not necessarily the case. It's two different matrices, if you will. So in local news, I will say what I miss in some ways that I'm trying to get back now is in local news, there's a real connection to the community, right? Like I was talking about running the teleprompter for, the CBS affiliate, Roger Cornish, Cindy Close. If I see them now, I'll kick and scream. So when your local news anchors and reporters, they're part of the community. They live there. And I think as far as your local coverage, your fire on 4th Street or your rally at City Council or the teachers are on strike or, the superintendent said this, that's all local news. And that's never going away. You need that, right? And when you go to the network, I think I underestimated, you lose a little bit of that because frankly, you're covering a whole country. So, not to trivialize it, but little things like I missed covering high school football. We used to do that in Wichita, and then you move to national, and it's about the Eagles. Go Eagles! No, but it's about, it's obviously it's a bigger picture. So it's one of those things where you really need both. I get the formula. I see why they have your local news, and then they toss it over to Lester. I mean, you need both. You need that full hour, 30 minutes apiece, to get the full picture, in my opinion, of what's going on in your world. And from a coverage standpoint, I'm not going to lie, the network is just a lot more competitive from a career standpoint. I mean, not that the folks in my local station weren't brilliant, because everybody's brilliant, but you're just dealing with people who are, everybody's an alpha personality. It's the cream of the crop. I wasn't kidding when I told you sometimes I walk in a room and everybody went to an Ivy League school, or everybody has 12 books and, they're working on a book, or, it's just, the energy is palpable. But if it's channeled in the right way, it's amazing and it's powerful. And at the network level, you meet the most amazing people because by the time, you're talking to them on the Today Show, they've done some amazing things. So I wouldn't trade it for anything, but I would never say that, one is better than the other. I loved my local news experience. And I know a lot of people at the network who miss it. They miss the connection to people.
Good afternoon and welcome. we're a part of the local chapter of the Association of Black Journalists.
Hey,
So
you know,
welcome.
all of my jobs in some sort of way have come from NABJ.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, can you give us briefly to tell people who are inspiring journalists or people who are members of NABJ who have been like displaced or people who are aspiring to get into the business, how to tell them to hang in and stick with this business. This business can be very cruel sometimes, but it's a great business. Can you just tell what advice you can give those type of people?
Absolutely. This business can be very cruel. So first of all, NABJ is National Association of Black Journalists. They have chapters in colleges, and then they have, professional chapters in different cities. And so when I was in college, I was in the college chapter. And again, I was at Northwestern, so there weren't a lot of, African-American females looking to be in journalism. In my class, I look now and I think about my class, and a lot of us are at NBC now. Joe Fryer, he's a reporter, Peter Alexander, so he's amazing journalist, but I was alone. So then you go to NABJ and you see other people who look like you, right? So you're, in addition to having like news writing workshops and stuff like that, in addition to, you're networking with people, even down to simple things like, I'm Black, I don't wash my hair every day. What do I do? How do I do this? Like little things like that somebody has to tell you, you learn from NABJ. And that is for me every summer where you get your fuel to keep going. I remember when I first started, I would get nervous and I would get cold sores. And I had a college professor, he was like, you're never gonna make it. You gotta figure that out. You gotta check your stress. And then I had another college professor who told me that I would never make it because I had this thick country twang. And I didn't know how to get rid of it. So I enrolled in a school of speech class at Northwestern, a voice and articulation class with all these actors and actresses or what have you. And I would go home and practice my accent and how to change my twang and all of that, And then I would go to NABJ and somebody would watch my tape and they would coach me. You got to have it in here or they will, like I said earlier, will eat you alive. But you have to know if you want it, it has to burn. You have to really want it, right? And if you do, I say you keep at it. You go to these conferences, you network with people. And these days, there's so many other ways besides just the big three or the TV stations. I meet college students who have their own shows already on YouTube or BuzzFeed. There are so many other ways in than the traditional ways that we all did, going to a small city and climbing up, the ladder. You don't have to do that anymore. You can start your own page. You can, be a hit on Twitter. And next thing you know, somebody's calling you and asking you if you can, at least even be a commentator. So I say, keep it up, keep grinding, stay prayerful if you pray, believe in yourself. But it will happen. It only takes one break. My first job, I sent out 44 audition tapes, 44 tapes. Do you want to know how many callbacks I had? 2? You're so kind. None. And then I sent out another batch, and I got this guy, he called me. He was like, is this Sheinelle? And I was like, yeah. He's like, oh, my name is so-and-so, so-and-so. I'm in Beckley, West Virginia. And I was like, okay. I'll take it. And shout out to Beckley. Right when I was going to take the Beckley, West Virginia job, I sent out more tapes, and then I saw a one-man band reporter position in Springfield, Illinois, and took that. So it was just one job. And then even to get to Tulsa, I sent out 60 audition tapes, no callbacks. So I called an old news director who worked with me in Springfield, and he goes, hey, come up here. Maybe we can find something for you. So every single job I've had, it's not because there were like 80 of them knocking at my door. It just takes just one person to believe in you. I hope I answered your question.
It seems like you've come very far in your journey of being a journalist, and I want to ask, what's your next step for you? Are you content to where you're at right now?
That's a really good question. I've always been pretty ambitious, right? I've always known what I wanted to do, and for the first time ever, I've really had to do some soul searching about what's next. I was telling the ladies yesterday, it used to be, you think you get to the Today Show and then you're like, good night, everybody. That's it. But it's not that way. I mean, you get there and again, people are writing books, people have production companies, people are doing side gigs. I was just saying, I just started co-hosting Dateline NBC on OWN on the Oprah Winfrey Network. And it's like, you got to do other things. And so I still want to do those other things. At the same time, I'm in a place where with 2 5-year-olds and an 8-year-old, they're just as busy with soccer and activities and ballet. And I want to be there. So for me, it's not about climbing anymore. It's about doing staying where I am, being happy, doing the job that I'm doing, but also being present in my kid's life. That's what's important to me. And, Lord willing, I stay healthy. And then maybe when they're older and off and out of the house, and then I want to do something that requires even more time, then absolutely. But right now, I am very content. And my bandwidth is tapped. I'm about doing all I can.
Hi, welcome to Cleveland. We're really happy to have you here. I'm a transplanted Chicagoan from Evanston. So
I used
my
to be like,
question-
I want to be rich and move to Evanston. Do you see these houses with the lakes? And it's amazing.
My question is, NBC, CBS, ABC have a long history of integrity-related journalists going way back. Again, being a Chicagoan, Lester Holt was there with us for many years. Never questioned his integrity, those kinds of things. Can you give us a glimpse into the meetings that you guys have when you're being called fake news from the White House? How do you keep being neutral about things when every day you have a long history of integrity and you're being called out as fake news because they don't like what you have to say?
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. I mean, I know these people. Like, one of my friends, Kristen Welker, right, works at the White House. She just got married. She works her butt off. Like, don't tell me. Peter, Alexander, all these folks work so hard. They have kids at home, a lot of them. So it's one of those things where I have to be honest with you. We're so busy that it may seem like we're worried about somebody calling us fake news, but as individuals, you're just trying to get through the next day and get to the next deadline. So it doesn't bother us as much in the moment because we have a job to do. Now, in moments like this and forums like this, we can take a step back and collectively talk about it. But there aren't any meetings where we're like, okay, guys, at 4:00, we're going to sit down and talk about how everybody's calling us fake news. There's no time for that. So I think it's forums like this and it's, organizations like NABJ and, journalism organizations, things like that, think tanks that can talk about how we can fix this problem. But when you're in it, you really don't have time to worry about it. It's like telling a kid who's being teased, you just have to say, put your head down and ignore them and keep doing what you're doing. It's kind of that. You just don't have time to worry about somebody calling you fake, especially when you know that it's not true. Now, if somebody's knocking at the door and you're in your basement typing up stories, you're fake news. So then you should worry. We don't have anything to worry about because, like I said, they're checking and rechecking. And, you talk about Lester, that is a good man. There's no fake about it.
On the subject of fake news, you said that there is fake news, and there obviously is, and news stations aren't. But if you want to research something on the internet or on your phone or anything, are there ways or tricks you can see if what is fake news and what is a reliable source?
It's very difficult, and I was really surprised lately at even the Twitter accounts. Where you look at this page of this woman and she looks like a real woman, and she's got followers. I mean, it's not as easy as you would think. You would think that you would be able to spot whether something was literally created by a bot, but you can't. So I think it's a challenge. Facebook has talked about the fact, and Twitter, they've all talked about ways that they're trying to kind of crack down on that. It definitely has to happen. All I can say is, the way we do in the news business, you have one source, you get an article from one place. That one place is not good enough to be a fact. We couldn't print something with one thing. You got to check and triple check, especially if it's something that stirs up anger or if it's partisan. You really have to do your homework. And I'm telling you that, but the reality is most people aren't doing that. If it comes across their feed, it's fact. So they're trying to work on that. It's definitely a real issue, which is why I think, the big 3 or 4 or however many there are and the cable networks, I still think we have a place. Everybody keeps saying that TV news is dying or what have you, but I still think there is a place for just good old fashioned journalism. You turn on somebody you can trust and believe and just kind of get at least some kind of a way to make sense of what's going on. Now, you may not agree with everything, but at least you need somebody to kind of help you make sense of all of it because you can't keep up with everything going on. If you ask me about tax reform and what's the latest in this moment, I can't even tell you because it's still happening. My phone is constantly with the feeds and then our own private NBC stuff. I mean, it's just nonstop.
Hi, I'm Alex Mikes. I'm with the Great Cleveland Association of Black Journalists. I'm still learning the ropes about forums for my first forum here. I mean, I do get a lot of news from Facebook, but I do check other sources. So because Facebook is now trying to bill itself as a source of news, do you think that they should be held to the same journalistic ethics as NBC and other news organizations?
Absolutely. If you're gonna, but the challenge is, it's not like they're saying with Facebook, it's not Facebook news. It's just random things that come into the feed. So it's not like it's Facebook's newscast. It's all the other ones that come up on your feed. That, how do you police, an organization that you don't even know whether it exists or not, out of Des Moines, Iowa? I mean, you know what I mean? It's just, in this, there are pros and cons to all this social media and the news, but I don't really know how they're going to police it, because it just takes one person creating something and then just pushing it out there. I don't know what the answer is. I do think that if someone claims to be news, they should be held to those same standards. But I also think that people don't care. You care, but I think Susie in Wichita, who's just angry, oh yeah, well I heard, and it said blah, 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 blah. She's not checking whether it's a credible news source, because you can't trust the media because it's fake, right? So, I can accuse you of doing something and be like, oh yeah, well that's fake, and then go and, keep doing it. Where is all this going? I do not know. You have to.
I have to stand up. Well, hi, and welcome again. You have so many great stories and so many words of wisdom. Do you have plans of writing your own book?
That's the first time anyone's asked me that question. Sure, why not? One day, I have so much in my head, and I would have to protect the people involved. I mean, if I told a tell-all about getting here and how I got here to the network. But sure, I would love to one day. There's so many things I would love to do. I'd love to write a children's book. I would love to write a book about, how to get through. I'd love to write a book about journalism. I mean, there are a lot of things I would love to do. I'd love to write columns for some magazines. I mean, there are a lot of things that are, I'm kicking around in my head. It's just the time. I mean, I was telling them last night, I'll be sitting on the news set, and I've got 2 talking heads, and then I'll get a text from my husband, hey, we're out of toilet paper. I'm solving world problems. So I've got a lot to juggle, but one day.
Hey, welcome to the land. Thanks for coming.
It's true. You guys see me looking down? That's what I'm looking at. No, I'm just kidding.
So in this social media age, people constantly are blurring the lines between entertainment and news. I'm thinking about SC6, Jamel Smith, Michael Hill, my favorite show on TV, and what recently happened with Jamel with her comments about number 45 on Twitter. How do you go about maintaining your personal life and not editorializing via social media and doing your day job or your weekend job?
That's a very good question. There is a difference between commentators and news anchors, commentators and journalists. We call them talking heads. There's a difference between, if I toss 2, the double boxes, and I have 2 people in the box and we're talking about, I have a professor and somebody else. They're commentating on the news, but they're not journalists, right? So if you have a show on ESPN and they're talking about, what they think and their opinion, that's one thing. But NBC News, let me tell you, they do not play. There's a difference between being a commentator or an opinion, whatever, on MSNBC, and then anchoring on the Today Show and NBC News. There is a line, and they are very clear about the fact that we will not cross it. And you don't dare. You come this far. So I know better than to go on Twitter and be like, it's just not going to happen. In other places, you're allowed to do that because people pay you because they want to hear your opinion. People want to hear what Wendy Williams has to say, right? That's her job. But she also can't just get on and start talking to, they're different sources. The danger is that people don't know the difference between the commentators and the talking heads and the people who are just on a cable network just spewing angry stuff. And then you turn on nightly news and then you see this man. We still value the power of journalism. I don't want to know what so-and-so thinks about every single thing. I just want to know that he's fair. And in my own personal life, I have my own style. As you see, I talk about whatever. And I think what I've learned is that, I used to do the 9 o'clock hour for a little bit with Tamron, or when Tamron left. I did the 9 o'clock hour with Dylan and Al Roker. And in that short 7 months, I mean, we would talk about everything from, I remember after the Ariana Grande concert, we talked about how scary it is for our kids to be able to go to concerts and stuff like that. And so there is a way to still handle news stories and talk about news, and you can still give your thoughts and your personal opinion, but there's always a line. And I think we're all very well aware of it. I've come too far to know, I know how not to cross that line. But other jobs, there is no line, so they can talk about it all they want. But even Jamel will tell you, like towards the end, she was like, okay, So it's just one of those things. And in this climate too, the ramifications are just, you could lose your job. So I have mouths to feed, so.
Hello, my name is Mary Ann Harris from Shaw High School, and these students, I brought them because I want them to try and be exposed to different things. And my question is regarding your coverage of the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday in Selma. Were there many young people there at that coverage involved? I'd just like to know how they are, I guess, taking this, taking it in a serious manner.
I feel like, let me think this through here because it's streamed. It wasn't what I expected in that nationally, so many people talked about it, and I feel like I thought, we were going to drive into Selma and there would be these crowds and there would just be this new city and there'd be young people out and just, I went to a high school there, and so I don't know what I thought it was going to be, but I'll be really honest with you. It was sad in that the state of the city, it hasn't moved as far as I thought it would as far as the economy and the just even in the buildings and what have you. You would think that it happened not that long ago, and I thought, and I just wanted it to be, I'm like, we're talking so much about the city. We need to pump some money into the city. We're all here, we need to, but you weren't staying at the hotels in Selma. You were staying in other places, So that's where the journalist in me is like, okay, let me talk to the local, this person and that person. Let's find a way to not only just come here in March, but let's pump some money into this city and the schools. And there was a lot of poverty there, and I wasn't ready for that. I didn't know it was going to be that way. So what I did find were a lot of young people from there with hope, and they were proud of Selma. They were proud of their history, and they were very well aware of what happened there. But I think I pulled some of them in a room, and a lot of them feel stuck. And they see what they see on TV, and they see how far some people have made it, and then they see the position that they're in, and there's this gap, and going to class every day is not quite getting you there. So I'm not going to lie, it was a powerful moment for me, and the coverage was powerful, but I have a soft spot for kids. So I walked away and I thought, okay, there's plenty of work to do. There's serious work to do, and not just Selma, but in cities all over this country. And I think sometimes we forget about these cities until we go and shine a light and we cover them. But a lot of these cities are, people, they're almost forgotten, and they need resources. That's the big thing. They need money. Does that make sense? Is that fair?
Another shout out from the Greater Cleveland Association of Black Journalists. I'm the president of the local chapter. Welcome to Cleveland. Glad to have you. You spoke about being the only and being lonely as well. Talk about the importance of diversity and why it is important that more voices are heard on a regular basis. Thank you.
That's kind of loaded. It's a challenge. I'm from Wichita, Kansas, and people, there are brown people in Wichita? Yes, there are lots of us. I'm gonna get you. So I can't say that I grew up and I don't know what it's like to be a minority. That's not true, right? But you go, even from an early age, I went to a public school. I went to a great school, Wichita Public Schools. And then you go in the AP classes, and there aren't a lot of brown faces in those classes. Right or wrong, it's gotten a lot better. But 25 years ago, there weren't a lot of us. And so from an early age, there were times when I would be the only one in a class. I'll tell you a quick story. I remember one time I was in AP English and I was the only black person in the class, and I wanted to be with my friends and I didn't want to be in that class. And it was like we were talking about Beowulf or something. I was like, I don't want to talk about Beowulf. I want to go to the other class. So apparently the AP class was like crowded or something like that. So I volunteered to get out of that class and go into the regular class. And that class, they were throwing things and they were throwing spit. Wow, it was a mess. And I remember the teacher's like, are you sure? And I'm like, no, I want to be in this class. And I went home to Grandmama. And I was bragging about how easy the class was and how, my friends are in this class and it's easy and it's amazing. It was like 4 o'clock. School was over at 2:30. And I remember getting back in her Lincoln and we had to drive back to school. And my grandmother walked in, asked for the principal. She was like, she just told me that she volunteered to get out of this class, put her back in the AP class. So the next day I'm back learning Beowulf. But I was like, but I don't want to go to that class. I'm the only one in there, But fast forward to being an adult, it's not a new thing to be the only one. I think the challenge is what we do. We represent you. We represent our cities, right? And so when you turn on the news in your local markets, it should reflect the city in which you live. So if the city is 60% black, you should see some black faces on the news. And so that's, to me, it's not even morally right or ethically right. It just makes good business sense to have this, your talent, your journalists reflect the city in which you live. I mean, I think we're getting better. You think about, especially print journalism, when you have a riot or you have something going on in the community. These are the journalists, and we know from NABJ that will go to those communities and people will talk to them because they know them and they're familiar with them, or they saw them at church the other day. So you need a variety of faces in your newsrooms, and that's the same for the network level. I remember. And this is light, so it's no big deal. You remember when Aaliyah died? You guys probably don't even know Aaliyah. It was during the National Association of Black Journalists. And my phone was blowing up because people didn't know who she was. And all the black journalists were at a conference. And I say that because it was a long time ago. Aaliyah, rest in peace. But that's an example, and that's a light, so I can give you that example. But imagine if it's something else, if it's something bigger, if there's something happening in a community in Cleveland and you didn't have any brown faces, you know what I mean? And it's not to say that someone who's white can't go and cover something that's black and vice versa, but it just makes good business sense. And to what I talked about earlier, we have to reflect the society that we want to live in. And that starts with, like I said, at the dinner table with people, you inviting over some friends, and it goes all the way up into our newsrooms. It matters. It really matters. And I think about some of the things that I've been able to stand up and speak about in some of my newsrooms over the years. It's a good thing I was there. And you look at what happens, look at some of the advertising campaigns that have gone horribly wrong. And people have questioned, was there a person of color in the boardroom or in the advertising room? How did this even make it to Twitter or Facebook? How did some of these campaigns even make it? Because even if somebody's intentions are solid, maybe it's just not something they thought about. So you need all sorts of voices in boardrooms and all sorts of industries.
Hi again, and welcome again. And my question is kind of an extension of what Boomer just asked you. When you find yourself as the only woman or the only minority in the room, and things are not going well, and you're being discriminated against, or the issue is contrary to what you believe, can you talk about how you navigate that so that you remain professional and you remain in the room, because we do want to stay in the room?
Sure. To be clear, I don't ever think that I have been discriminated against where I am. A lot of my angst and anxiety is self-imposed, and it's being self-aware. I guarantee you there are days where I recognize I'm the only one and nobody else gives two flips because they're so busy, So a lot of it is just that I'm aware, and I'm aware that I need to have a voice, and I'm aware that I should probably raise my hand and go to that store even though I don't really want to. So a lot of it comes from me. It's not something that I feel. Now, are there times where, growing up, I look back and it's like, okay, because, I'm happy and, whatever. So, Sheinelle, you go to the happy thing and then we'll send so-and-so to that one. I had to be careful of that, because just because I'm nice and naive doesn't mean I'm not smart. And so sometimes you have to tell people, and they have to see it. And then once people know your worth and know your value, and especially where I am, it's all hands on deck. So it's not like somebody's saying, oh, Sheinelle, you can't go cover this or go cover that. If I raise my hand and I want to go, they will send you, because by the time you get to this level, they know you can cut it. So if there's anything that you feel, it's coming from myself, if that makes any sense.
Hi, good
Hi.
afternoon. I've got 3 college-age kids, including, by the way, a set of twins. And
part of the team.
right. So my kids, I don't think have ever read the newspaper. I don't think they've ever watched network news. I don't know whether it's their age or this generation. And do you worry about that and whether they'll evolve into that? And what do you see the future of your industry in light of my kids and your kids and how they're going to deal with that type of topic?
It is. It's definitely very, very different. We have at NBC, they've started a Snapchat newscast, and it is doing extremely well, more so than I think I even thought. I was on Snapchat for maybe like a week, and I was like, this is too much. I can't. How many of you guys are on Snapchat? Of course, I don't even know why I asked. Really? No, I'm just kidding. So it's a new normal for them. So, the powers that be they know. So now we're pumping, newscasts into Snapchat, but we've had to change how we do them. They're short, they're quick video snippets. They're quicker, it moves. There's a partnership now with BuzzFeed. I just did a bunch of spots for BuzzFeed, and I never thought that I would, but that's how you reach the millennials and these new folks. So I think the format may change, how we do it, but the content will never go away, right? I think there will always be a need for good storytelling. I think there will always be a need to take complicated issues and make them simpler, and hear what other people have to say. But I think you're right in that in 10 years, I don't know where it will be, but I think you're right. It will be different, and it will be probably in our hand.
Today at the City Club, we've been enjoying a forum with Sheinelle Jones, co-anchor for NBC News Weekend Today. Today's forum is part of the Diversity Thought Leadership Series sponsored by a generous gift from KeyBank. We thank you, Margot, for your continued support. We welcome guests at a table hosted by the Greater Cleveland Association of Black Journalists. And that brings us to the end of today's forum. Thank you, Ms. Jones. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This forum is now adjourned.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.
Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream are made possible by the generous support of PNC and the Raskin Family Fund, with additional funding from Robert Conrad, Cleveland State University, the Chautauqua Institution, the Payne Fund, and the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland Incorporated.